Collingwood are finally slowly but surely making a case to go back-to-back this year, starting with a 3-game win streak off the back of going 0-3, and faced with no bigger task than playing Essendon in the Anzac Day game this Thursday. We know what this event brings, what type of energy, so it's just going to feel like another finals-like intensity game for both teams involved. So really excited from that standpoint going into this game. Now, last time Collingwood played Essendon, it was late last year. Collingwood won by 70 points. The game was essentially over in the first quarter. I think we scored 45 odd points to Essendon, who hadn't scored a single goal by that point. So I don't know how much we can look into that game for reference going into this game, as our season was going elsewhere. We had already ticked off top 4, so we were just looking for a bit of form going into the final series, whereas Essendon were completely done, checked out mentally. They got absolutely spanked by GWS. Maybe the week or two before that, by more than 100 points, and Jesse Hogan kicked 8 on them. So it felt like a dead rubber. While it was important Collingwood got the win, it still felt like there was no intensity in that game, and the game was iced after the first quarter, which is what everyone felt. That's how everyone sort of felt like the game would go, just given the circumstances of both teams at that point of the season. A few players to highlight from that fixture. De Goey was exceptional, was the highest rated player for the game. He had 27 disposals, 20 of them being effective, kicking a goal assist and 7 score involvements. Tom Mitchell was outstanding, 33 disposals, 7 clearances, 10 contested possessions. Both De Goey and Mitchell were relatively down in form compared to how they were trending last season. And they've just revivified their season in the span of 2 games, and that's really good to see from a Collingwood element. Now, it probably helps their case even further, the fact that they've had a really good game against Essendon late last year. So some positive emotions would be attached to playing against a team like Essendon, and hopefully they can continue their form as they have started in the last couple of weeks. Looking at our opposition specifically, we want to really keep a close tab on Zach Merrett. He played really well in a game where Essendon were pretty much uncompetitive for that game. He's also been one of the top 5 players in the league this year so far, so definitely need to keep an eye on him, and I'm sure the team have something in mind to ensure that Zach Merrett doesn't go crazy against Collingwood on Thursday. It's quite clear that if Collingwood bring effort, pressure and this unforgiving mentality, then everything else that Collingwood look pretty in will come along for the ride. So get that pressure, win that contest, the first contest, get the ball into our forward half and create this great wall that comprises of Jeremy Howe, Darcy Moore, Billy Frampton, Maynard, Isaac Quaynor and co. We set them up to be structurally sound, while our forwards apply great pressure inside the opposition's defensive 50, like we did against Port Adelaide. Eventually the dam walls do get broken. You saw with Port Adelaide, they just got exhausted with this repeat pressure. They couldn't get out of their own half. And that goes a long way against these teams, and these methods of I guess game strategy are what really sticks the test of like final series games. So to have a forward half game is very important, and to be competitive in the contested ball realm is also very crucial, and we were plus 40 against Port Adelaide, which is massive off the backs of performances from increase in performances in Tom Mitchell, De Goey, Nick Dacos, even Darcy Cameron. And I'm going to talk about Darcy Cameron in a future video soon, so keep an eye on him. I'm not going to talk about him too much in this video. I don't want to give too much away, but he's been really important for Collingwood this year. So talking more to how do Collingwood win? Well, contested ball is going to be important, as I've already mentioned. Interestingly enough, the average for contested possession is down compared to last year. I think we're down by 5 possessions, generally speaking, per team compared to last year. And that probably just points towards the fact that the ball is moving a lot quicker across the ground and with a little bit more ease, and that's probably a testament to the increase in ball usability and understanding and strategy on how to move the ball. So those, I guess, are methods intertwined with those improvements in skills. I think that's probably seeing a more open game. But in saying that contested ball is important in finals like games, and we're actually in the top 4 for contested possession differential per game against our opposition. So what that looks like is we're 4.5 plus contested possessions compared to our opposition, which is a vast improvement compared to last year. We were below AFL average, only seeing a differential of 0.5 per game. So it's not something particularly we've been familiar with the Collingwood game. We've been smacked in some games when it came to contested possession, particularly in the final series last year. The one that rings out to me was the Melbourne one. So really good and positive to see that we're making improvements in that domain. And as I've pointed out in the last few weeks, our tackling differential between teams has been monumental. We're talking plus 30 against Brisbane and I think a significant amount in another recent game. I can't quite recall it. I think it may have been Hawthorn. And Essendon are actually quite good in this stat themselves, which actually finds both Collingwood and Essendon in the top 2 for tackles differential in their games. So Essendon have been dominating teams in that stat category so far this season. And it's probably going to be one of the most important stats come this Thursday in such a important game, what it means to the nation as a whole. So expect to see a crash and bash type of game for a special occasion like Anzac Day. Talking to Collingwood's ball movement, Collingwood are back in the top 4 for scoring shots per inside 50, which would suggest that we are getting more looks on goal by way of better ball movement, and that was something that was a part of our identity last year, being a top 4 side back then, and having a high conversion rate despite having a typically lower inside 50 compared to what the averages look like around the AFL right now. Collingwood and Essendon have struggled defensively in bits and pieces throughout the season thus far. They're the 2 teams that have conceded the most points out of the top 13 teams in the league right now. So definitely room for improvement for both sides. And I think there's room for optimism when it comes to the improvements in Collingwood's defence recently as well, particularly against Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide scored half of their points, being 40 of their 80 in the first quarter. And from there, Collingwood shut up shop. So some real positive signs for both teams, being Collingwood and Essendon, when it comes to their defensive improvements in recent time. Okay, so let's look at some player points and some player matchups. Firstly, I'm really excited to see whether Braden Maynard matches up on someone like Jake Stringer for the main portion of the game. Braden Maynard has quietly been the 3rd highest rated player for Collingwood this season so far. So while he doesn't fill the stat sheet with massive numbers, I think his consistency across all the statistics that are taken and considered by Champion Data have put him in a position to state that he's a top 3 player for the club right now for the role that he fulfills for Collingwood. And then we got Jake Stringer, who's had a mini resurgence. You know, most of us from the outside looking in as fans of the game probably thought Stringer was done at some point last year as far as his trajectory of his career was going. And now he finds himself being the leading goal scorer for Essendon, averaging 2.3 goals and also 1.7 tackles inside 50 per game. And if you can average more than 1.5 tackles inside per game, you'll more often than not at the end of the season find yourself in the top 10 for tackles inside 50 if you can average more than that. And sitting at 1.7 right now suggests that he can very well do that by the time the season ends. So I really do hope that enthralling encounter between Maynard and Stringer transpires on Thursday. 2 contested balls in Tom Mitchell and Will Setterfield will probably likely come up against each other in the centre bounce and the stoppage work around the grounds as well, so keep an eye on that. Ben Mackay has carried on his intercepting form from North Melbourne last year, being top 3 in the league for intercept marks. He's maintained that this year for Essendon. So will we see someone like Brody Myercheck obstruct Ben Mackay in his ways to intercept the ball? We've seen against Port Adelaide, Lachie Schultz is not afraid to put himself in front of the interceptors for the opposition teams. You would have seen, if you guys have watched my analysis, the video analysis for the game between Port Adelaide and Collingwood, we saw Lachie Schultz get in the way of Aaliyah a couple times and was willing to impede his run at the ball to ensure that those key interceptors don't have an impact aerially. Lastly, does Sam Durham get the job on De Goey or Nick Dacos, or does he alternate between the two depending on the time and moment of the game? He did quite a great job on Bontempelli and earned a bit of ball himself and maybe even kicked a goal on Bontempelli a couple of weeks ago. So let's see if Essendon assign that role to Durham between Dacos and De Goey. So as far as team selection is concerned, well, Reef McInnes was made the sub last week, and subsequently we had Hoskin Elliott play as that 3rd key tall forward for the most part. We've seen him feature on the wing, we've seen him feature in the back line this year, but his had his performance of the season in the forward line, taking great marks and having a significant impact across the duration of the game. He would have played behind Brody Mahachek, and I think Mason Cox featured as a key tall forward for the most part of that game, leaving Darcy Cameron in the ruck from memory. So that will probably remain the same. Does that mean if Hoskin Elliott has solidified his position as the third key tall forward, what does that mean for Reece McInnes? Does he still serve the role as a sub, or do we get someone in like Oleg Markov, who could probably fill a role from a defensive half standpoint? Or do they want Reece McInnes as that speedy, medium tall size forward to come in and be an option late in the game? And speaking of Markov, he was the coach's MVP for the VFL game against Coburg on the weekend. He had 27 disposals off the halfback flank, so really impressive, putting his hand up for selection. Unfortunately, Collingwood lost their VFL game 87-72 against Coburg, as I mentioned. Some impressions being Ned Long having another serviceable game, 19 disposals and 3 scoring shots, 1 goal and 2 behind. So just making his case for that mid-season draft. And then Finn McRae, really just a performance that is typical of him. 25 disposals and 8 tackles. Always fills those stat lines in the VFL. Just waiting for him to be able to translate that into AFL performances, but he will get that eventually. Category B, rookie, I think Will Parker played off the halfback, collecting 20 disposals, kicked a goal in his first game of footy in 5 years, and then that's a VFL level. So he hasn't played any footy in the last 5 years, comes into the VFL and has a great performance to get the ball rolling. As far as injuries are concerned, we have Jacob Ryan, Nathan Kruger, and Dimitir expected to feature in the VFL this week, if not next week. So some of them will be scattered across the 2 weeks and they'll filter in through the VFL. So I just can't wait to see what Dimitir is about, and hopefully he debuts this week as opposed to next week, but I'm happy to wait if need be. Josh Eyre is still a little bit away, but is making some good inroads to get back into the VFL. And Oscar Steen is set for a stint on the sideline with a toe surgery, so he's expected to miss up to more than 3 months. So that's more of just a wait and see and see how it progresses, but not great news for Steen, of course. And to be fair to the Bombers, they also haven't had the kindest fixture themselves. They've travelled to Adelaide twice, they've played in Sydney, and they've got a respectable record coming out of that. So no excuses from that perspective, and no team would need any more motivation to play at a high level in a game like Anzac Day. Hopefully we can get up in this highly anticipated game between Essendon, who have been performing very well. We've obviously had the wood over them in the last few Anzac games, one namely being the one where Elliott kicked the goal after the siren. So hopefully we can get a win, maybe not as close as that game, and have a bit of breathing space by the time that siren goes in the 4th quarter. Go Pies.